Grab your cup of coffee or tea and get ready for this week's Crystal Connections radio show with your hosts Heather Caton and Natalie Sabatini. Now your hosts of Crystal Connections radio show, Heather Caton and Natalie Sabatini.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third episode here of Crystal Connections. I am Natalie Sabatini, and joining me today is...
This is Heather. Good to have you on air with me, Miss Natalie.
Yes, absolutely. We're here, we're, basically gathered around for an exciting episode, The Energy Within, the Crystalline Matrix. So once again, episode 3. I'm so excited, Heather, to talk about the things that we're most passionate about, which is, of course, crystals. And I kind of want to start off the program with just talking about some of the crystals that really inspire us, the crystal of the month, if you will. Would you like to start it off, Heather?
Well, sure. I've done a few gemstones or crystals of the month, and I'm usually choosing them based on just what's energetically coming to me at the time. And some of them, I have a lot of experience or knowledge about, and some of them just come to my brain, or I might see it and it pops out at me, and I don't know too much about them, never used them. And for some reason, I usually just go with my gut and say, well, this is the one that I need to learn about or get connected with or what have you. So upon our discussion about coming up with a gemstone or crystal of the month for this show, I've been just resonating with moldavite. And so I'm super excited because it is a tektite that I actually have in my collection, and I haven't really been utilizing it for a while. So it was a gentle reminder to my spirit to get reconnected to it again. So that is my, I call it crystal or gemstone, although it's neither. It's a tektite and it's in a group of minerals, but moldavite is the one I am going to talk about tonight.
Oh, wonderful. And I've heard so much about moldavite, a lot of, information regarding its properties, and it's certainly quite special. I don't know much about it, so I'm interested in learning what you're going to share with us today. On my end, I'm really looking forward to just talking a little bit about azurite. It's the stone of mastery, and one with a very interesting set of histories and mysteries associated with it itself. But yeah, let's go ahead and just jump into moldavite. How were you introduced to it, Heather? When did it come into your life, and why is it so special?
Okay, so yeah, interesting story. I had a friend many, many years ago who actually just sent me a piece of it in the mail along with a book called Moldavite, a Starborn Stone of Transformation. And of course, within the title, very intriguing, right? A Starborn Stone of Transformation. What is this? And it was a little olive green stone that I had, just beautiful. It's an olive green. So the book is what actually got me into moldavite, and then I started really, seeking it out and doing a little bit more research about it. So it has been thought to have come from a meteor impact, and it only is in one place on this earth that we currently are aware of, and that is the Czech Republic. So it formed by condensed rock vapors after the meteorite hit the earth. And it's known or has been talked about as sort of an extraterrestrial gemstone on our earth, born from the stars, if you will, right? So it has these properties of outer space, or what we would call maybe extraterrestrial outer space properties, along with terrestrial, which is earthbound minerals, right? So just that idea of that is really interesting. So the heat from the impact, of course, metamorphized all that was around it,
Mm-hmm.
and all the surrounding rocks, and that's what formed this crystal over a large area, um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, in the Czech Republic. So
Mm-hmm.
the the crazy thing is, if you think about it, because it's being mined and found, and it somehow made its way up towards
Mm-hmm.
the Earth's surface, mostly from a lot of farmers and plowers who were just plowing their fields, made
Mm-hmm.
its way up and was found. But the thing that we have to remember, just like with just about any gemstone or mineral that we're talking about, is, when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
Um, it's only in this one place. And I know in a previous show we talked about Larimar. Larimar is the same way. It comes from one place of the earth. So I feel like we have to be really mindful with a lot of these stones and gems and minerals that we're extracting from our earth, right? Because
Right.
they're not necessarily being replaced as fast as we're taking them and
And
utilizing them.
commercializing
So
them. Yeah.
exactly, and
Quick
commercializing. So
quick question, Heather. Is moldavite the kind of stone that would be optimal to use as jewelry? Or, I mean, is it like a soft? I mean, I would imagine it's a little bit harder, of course, being, part of a
it's
meteorite, but
It's in the scale for hardness, it's about a
Mhm.
5 on the Mohr
Okay.
scale, so it's about right in the center. It
Mhm.
is one of the only tektites that is faceted that can be
Mhm.
used in jewelry. So absolutely. In fact, the piece that I have first received was completely faceted, which you could use in a ring or a necklace or something like that. But a
Beautiful.
lot of the specimens that I have seen, um, are mostly in its raw form. In its
Mhm.
raw form. So if you've been to any metaphysical shop or rock shop, or sometimes the gem and mineral shows, they oftentimes will display it, and people really like it that way too, in that raw
Mhm.
form. And those that are not even usually sensitive to the energies of this stone often will feel it with moldavite. In fact, I had a neighbor here who who I've been friends with for years, and she actually had it around her neck. This
Mhm.
had been about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I approached her and I saw it and I said, "Oh my gosh." I noticed she had a new piece around her neck, and she goes, "Yeah." She said, "I've just been really feeling this one, and I was really connected to it when it was in my hand, and so I had to have it." And she, interestingly enough, talking back to the stones that you were talking about, had been, every time that I saw her, wearing that lapis lazuli for a long, long time, and then all of a sudden she had this on around her neck. So
Ah,
a
okay.
lot of people who consider themselves star children, many of you
Mhm.
may have heard that term before, really find this to be a very useful stone, and for those that are just can be sensitive to energy, sensitive to emotion, sensitive to frequency and things going on in the world around them.
Mhm.
um, this this stone has been extremely helpful for those, um, and to be able to it's
What do you say,
use
communicate and
yeah, communicate, reach higher realms. I mean, it's connected to the higher chakra.
Mhm.
So it helps with transition, for downloading even information. It's been
Hmm.
found, and where that information is coming from could be multiple and different sources. We keep an open mind. um,
Right.
so for those that are sensitive, or maybe you don't even know that you're sensitive, it's just been found that this stone um, has really affected people who may have not been affected by stones in the past, if you've ever
Mhm.
used them. So really just a spiritual purposes, and I love it because it is and harmonizes and works and communicates with that terrestrial and extraterrestrial energy as well. So it makes our experience in this life a little bit smoother. It helps with, emotional trauma, and it's getting, it's getting some momentum as far as in the world, amongst gemstones and collectors, as well as people just interested in energies and that kind of thing anyway as well. So
That's amazing. I love, seeing Moldavite. I've never, I felt like purchasing it in the past just because of, those same qualities that you mentioned, but it certainly feels powerful, even just kind of looking at it, the way that it's shaped, the way that the crystal itself, like the crystals within the crystal kind of like emanate out. And some of the specimens I've seen are just really kind of unique. So I get the attraction towards it for sure. But yeah, absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, remember it's a tetkite, so you're looking at sort of um, that volcanic glass, like obsidian and stuff like that. And so this sort of falls within the same family, except it's coming from that. Like I said, it's coming from what's been known as like a meteor impact. So I think it has the energies and a collectiveness in its minerals and stuff that just makes it really special. And maybe that's why a lot of people just right away connect to it when they're holding it. But I would encourage our listeners, like, go out, seek, read about it, research, see what it will do for you. I remember my first experience when I first held it, when my friend had sent that to me. I mean, I just felt like my vibration just increased. Like if I could have measured my my electromagnetic field, I felt like it was just going to be just increasing just from holding it. So I'm glad that I saw it on my friend's neck, and glad that it just was in my brain to revisit it again, because it's certainly a stone that has influenced and impacted my gem world, if you will.
That's beautiful. And that's the whole
So
point of this program. We're really trying to expand on the mineral kingdom and, its purpose, their abilities to enhance, as you other magnetic fields or whatever the property may be. And that's why we're drawn to them, because it's a certain language that has been forgotten and, or might have been forgotten at one point, but is reawakening, so to speak. But yeah,
yeah, I
absolutely
love that.
fascinating.
Yeah, I love that you said that,
Interrupt you. Go ahead.
reawakening. Yeah, reawakening, and there's a communication happening. There's a language that's happening. So I want to hear about the language of Azurite and your experiences with it. I'm super excited about hearing more about this stone.
Yeah, and it's one of those stones that, like mold that you with, and I would advise a lot of care and just caution with. It's been known to do some pretty amazing things in the past. Psychics that have interacted have mentioned that it is capable of levitating, like actual. When we talk about crystals, they're mechanisms. So the abilities of a stone can only be drawn out from the light which is emanating from a person. So essentially, more resonant the person is, or the more they are developed, like to be the tools. That's something to it. Yeah, as right, stone of mastery. It's a stone that has been used in Atlantean times. It was thought that only those that were high would have access to stone and be able to actually utilize it. Utilized by the priests, the priesthood. It's one of the stones that is bringing effect. When light enters the stone or crystal, it usually, a positive on that. But with for, well, which linguists and lapis lazuli, it does not occur. In other words, light goes into the stone and it is held within. So it's one of those crystals that you really should expose it to light if you're planning on using. So that's one thing. Another to be how it can be used psychically. On my end, I love using my crystals for psychic development, dream traveling. Love to stand in order that you really need to activate your third eye, your mental capacities. Azurite is the stone to be able to do that. It's a stone that allows you to kind of refocus and, once again, amplifies the magnetic field around a person. But once again, highly caution against just using it as a novelty piece, or even just kind of, a lot of people tend to just purchase crystals nowadays because of the appearance. This is not the kind of stone to do that with. You need to have a lot of respect and kind of reverence towards it. It also has associations with the Archangel Metatron, so it kind of tells you about how it's been used to communicate with the divine or other forces at the same time. So wouldn't you say that's quite a bit right there, Heather? What it can do. It's certainly an amazing crystal. Is it something that you're interested in?
It's a beautiful stone, and I don't have too much experience with it. Of course, I've seen azurite, and most of the time I see it in combination with the malachite. So that azurite malachite that you see in a lot of
Right.
cabs where it's that green and that blue, which of course the azurite named for its deep blue color, and a lot of the copper that's inside of it, which gives it sort of its luster. I'll mention, if I may, and hopefully my connection is okay. It's been a little bit in and out, the connection, from what I'm hearing. So I hope I caught everything that you said.
Sure.
But the color is that deep blue. So I'm thinking azul, right? Azul, azurite.
Correct.
There's a connection to it. So one of the things that I was reading about that I thought was so interesting. Okay, so that blue pigment was actually used in the Middle Ages, for paintings and stuff. And what they have found is that this pigment, because it's been exposed to the weather, sun, you talked about that, and light. The interesting thing is that now this azurite is actually gaining a green malachite hue. So I thought that was so fascinating. So when you look at paintings, or if you're going to a museum, if you can pick, point out or find a painting where that azul, that bluish, if it's been exposed to sort of the elements, is have that green hue, which is why now, you have your Persian blue and different things like that. They're more man-made, because of course, all of these pigments that we have, including the one that was made from azurite, have weathering conditions over time, so I just thought that was so fascinating. And you can still be found today and still used by painters, mostly as more of a novelty, or maybe historical purposes in their work. But I just thought that was interesting, that the azurite is actually turning into that malachite, that greenish color. Probably make for some beautiful skyscapes.
Yeah, and that's beautiful, because we're talking about transmutation, essentially from one form to another. The stone itself is typically recommended in its, natural, like azurite form, rather than the malachite if you're planning on using it for, psychic development. But regardless, as you mentioned, it certainly is beautiful to look at, and it can be appreciated. I also thought it was fascinating that in the past, as you mentioned, the Middle Ages, they would round up like crystals and minerals, and, as you said, make certain pigments out of them. It's so interesting to know that they would use the lapis lazuli and the azurite, even though they were quite expensive to do so, and use them on like religious books and documents, manuscripts. Think about that. There's a spiritual connection with the lapis lazuli and the azurite. So of course, it makes sense that they would use those particular pigments and copper in general as well.
Absolutely, and of course we know the copper is really, a favored in conductor, and also this stone was also a favorite of the ancient Egypt, um,
Hmm.
as well, the azurite. But yeah, I mean, just a facilitator of meditation, um, of movement, if you will, whether it's spiritual, communication. Um, um, Cellular reprogramming, amplifies through the nervous system. That's where that copper is really good, right? Because it's a conductor. And just, it's a stone that you really want to, if you look it up, if you do research, if you're using it, you really want to be mindful of it because it is connected to so much of the body.
Hmm.
And if you're and you just want to be aware of it, especially um, if you're using it for particular purposes or movement purposes. But it is a master healer stone, so it
Right.
brings everything back in balance. So if you can utilize it properly or work with somebody who knows how to use it in a safe way, because if used properly, it is allowing you to do these things in a safe way, then you'll be able to bring yourself back in some balance.
Yeah.
With
And
this.
one thing to really mention on top of everything that you said, Heather, which is absolutely correct, this is not really the kind of stone that you want to use for, jewelry. Even if you are able to find someone that can facet it and make like a pendant out of it, it's quite rare to be able to do so just because it's so soft. I believe on the hardness scale, I think it's like a 2. Might be wrong on that, but it's not something that you would want to fracture or unnecessarily utilize. Just holding it in your hand and letting the resonance, the photonic energy kind of resonate with your Merkaba, that would be the most ideal situation there, if you can.
Yeah, a lot of times when you find it, you'll find it mixed with other minerals. So, I
Hmm.
mean, in most jewelry, you're going to see the azurite malachite, and maybe you have a little bit more azurite in it than the malachite, depending on where you are, and if you have it in a raw form, or, rarely, mostly, you'll see it in jewelry as both.
Hmm. Right, and kind of going into the subject of vortices, for all of you who may be at this time near a vortex, a sacred site, I would highly encourage taking your, whether it's your moldavite or your azurite or any other stone that you may have, and kind of just using it there. It's one thing to use a stone in a regular location that isn't considered either a sacred site or like a meridian or other significant points around the earth. But using it there essentially will heighten the effects of whatever stone you have, especially these power stones, these master stones. So being able to do that is certainly an opportunity for not just psychic development, but of course spiritual development. That's the way I see it anyways. Being able to utilize crystals for our personal well-being. Are you still with me, Heather? Oh, it looks like Heather is with us. It's just she's experiencing a little bit of a latency on her end. We'll give her a few moments here. Please stand by.
Okay, this is executive producer Sandra Sabatini of the Crystal Connections radio show. We are actually in a holding position right now, waiting for Heather Caton to join us. Natalie, it's been a fascinating conversation that you've had with Heather in regards to topic tonight about energy within the crystalline matrix. This, of course, is episode 3 on an ongoing series of Crystal Connections radio show. Natalie and Heather is been wonderful host on the Other World Global Network. Once again, this is a mini series, and we're going to have Heather and Natalie with us doing these wonderful shows here. We hope that you're enjoying this mini series that we're having here. We're just waiting for Heather to reconnect with us.
Okay. And while we wait, for those of you who are joining us today, kind of getting back into the subject of crystals and vortices, once again, it's super important that if you are going to be using your crystal, make sure that you, of course, energize and cleanse them properly. Once again, crystals are tools, and they allow us to convert energy, and that energetic conversion is completely dependent upon us. So using that high vibration, that positive frequency certainly helps simplify everything. Yes, Heather, are you there?
I am.
Okay, I lost you temporarily, but no worries. Continuing the conversation here,
I think the energy was just too much, talking about those high frequency stones. Like everything just kind of blanked out over on my end.
No worries. Just talking here about the applications of crystals and how they're tools that help us convert energy, and the science kind of behind everything. Behind crystals. That being said, so moving forward.
And we were talking about in our previous show, can you hear me okay?
I can. Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, in our previous show, I'm not sure if you touched upon this, we talked about the platonic solids, right? Mm-hmm. So we talked about the sacred geometry, and then how crystals that are shaped or formed or in those pieces of sacred geometry, which is, the cube, the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, the isohedron, and how we can utilize the sacred communication of geometry married with the gemstones and crystals, and to be able to use that as a conduit with our own healing and our own ability to connect with particular energies. So that was really something we hammed up in our last end discussion. So that, even on a small scale, we could start to talk about it on a worldly or earthly scale when we start talking about earth energies and the vortexes and things like that. And I know you have some ideas and experience. Mm-hmm. Not sure if you started chatting about that.
No, you're right on time. You're right on time.
What is a vortex, right? And we're not talking weather here, but it's a similar idea.
I like to think of it, and this is just my personal interpretation, it's a center in which the energy is, what would be the best way to describe it? It's like a fluctuation. That would be one way to physically experience it. But also, too, they're like gateways of, portals in and out, so to speak. And yes, I've definitely had my own experiences with in particular, the Sedona vortex, and also to kind of going into Chaco Canyon. It was a wonderful experience being able to feel the resonance of that area. So, we're talking about a lot of energy. We're talking about a lot of crystalline energy, and not just from this time space, but also from a different time space. So there's a lot of history, in certain areas. And in particular, if you notice, historically, there's always been people that have surrounded these sacred sites. And one kind of wonders, well, what drew them in? Well, perhaps it was the energy of the site. People are drawn to energy, whether they realize it or not, maybe even subconsciously. For the less sensitive, they kind of just tend to gravitate towards these areas. And we are light, we are crystalline, so naturally, whatever is resonating on a certain level is going to draw you in. It's just the way it is, as it was in the past in Egypt as well. People were drawn in, and times change, but it seems like energy still kind of, at least its processes are pretty similar. But yes, in regards to my particular experience, I had the pleasure of going to Chaco Canyon and going through almost like a sacred initiation.
For those that
Yes.
aren't aware, where is that?
It's it's in Arizona, in the state of Arizona. If you kind of just Google it and look up Chaco Canyon, you'll be able to find more information here. But yeah, give me 1 second here. I'm sorry, I'm having a little. Oh, I'm sorry, New Mexico. That's kind of an interesting situation there. I had a 3-day journey where I was completely just so tired and just exhausted. And my spouse and I were all over the place, so I apologize, New Mexico. And we went through 3 different states, actually I think 4. And in the process, I got lost. We were partially in Bandelier at one point, then we went through Arizona. And then New Mexico, and I think we ended up somewhere near Utah or Las Vegas. But getting back to the story here, yes, New Mexico. And go ahead and Google it. Don't take my word for it. It's one of those areas that Native American people have long used as, once again, initiation centers. So more than anything, more than geography here, focusing on the mental, how would I say this? The effects that it has on one's mental capacities is certainly astonishing. You start to literally experience the auditory, kind of like auditory visions, and also to, if I may, I had a personal experience where we kind of just started to see and hear things from other worlds in the process. So it's kind of a place that if you're open to it, you're going to experience something. You're definitely going to view things that you may not have heard of or expected, but they're certainly there because the portals are wide open. So taking a crystal with you and blessing the land, blessing this space is certainly key. I had the pleasure of taking my quartz crystal in particular, and being able to cleanse and being able to energize was certainly, something that I'll never forget. It was an unforgettable experience.
Well, it sounds like an amazing adventure.
There was a lot tied to it, and yeah, it was a lot, but it's kind of one of those things that if you do take a journey, whether it's a sacred journey or even just one for, personal development, you're going to find something. It certainly will affect you on some level. But yeah, Heather, do you have any personal experiences that you want to share?
Well, I'm not sure. I maybe a couple. I mean, certainly nothing like what you experienced in Sedona or Chaco Canyon, and of course Sedona. A lot of people have heard or know it. It's been known as a very spiritual, open place where people have some very interesting experiences there and kind of drawn there. And these energetic places that we find in our planet are where, you may have heard of ley lines before. You may have heard of, these lines that happen, and we have, mathematical mathematicians who look at these lines and see
meridians,
where these places, these meridians end up. And you might even think of these meridians as sort of chakras. So we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about the macro into the micro again. So, the micro might be considered our chakras within our own bodies. Well, it translates and mirrors itself onto, our earth and then our universe as well.
Mm-hmm.
So mathematically, people that are interested in this sort of subject have looked at these places, and it's sort of where these places fall, where these energetic lines fall on our planet. So certainly that area has been known to people, and then people, whether aware of it or not, just like you said, have experienced something or felt something or whatever. The way that the juniper trees even grow in that part of the world is extremely interesting and different than where it happens in other places. So just from a scientific aspect too, that's really interesting. And why is that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't, if anybody's been to, traveling and have a place that just, people have had healing experiences and maybe are drawn to that place over and over and over again, or feel like they can't leave. Even in this area that I am in Arizona, there are still to this day tribes that travel through this particular area because of what they feel or the energetic properties that are held here, that manifest here. So, and a lot of these spiritual journeys that take place from different, in different cultural groups happen in these particular areas. Sometimes it's to a mountaintop like Mount Shasta. Do some research on Mount Shasta and their spirituality and that the energy that place has held, and sort of the opening like you're talking about. So you think about a vortex, like the bottom of a tornado, like a hole. And so these have been places where energy is really directed, like that meridian word that you're talking about, or that chakra, that meridian of energy, the spiraling that's happening, right? So you're right on point with that. So, I encourage people, look these places up, find where they are. And a lot of people, you're saying, why are all these people taking this journey to the Himalayas or to this place or to this place? Maybe there's a connection there, or something that's happening that we're not even fully aware of or in understanding about. But there's something to it, maybe we just don't have all the answers yet. But some of my travels in Eastern Europe have brought me to a place or two that have held some really spiritual and healing energy. And talking within the locals there, they said multiple times and came from different people from different experiences that, that they considered it a chakra of the earth. And that was kind of the way that their interpretation of it in the English language. So, kind of sparked some curiosity there. Which chakra are you talking about?
Right. No. And it's certainly, we could definitely say that each, area or sacred site within the earth is definitely like the equivalent of a body. There's something there. There's a certain symmetry that I would definitely say exists there. On that end, I completely agree with you with regards to Mount Shasta. I myself have been in the surrounding area. Even just being in the surrounding areas, you notice that the quality of the water and the effects that it has on the body is certainly different from other areas. And you kind of wonder, well, why is that? In some of the other places that I've been to, including Bandelier, not going to name the state because I'm not quite sure at this point, but I saw a lot of people that were coming in trying to replenish their energies. Essentially, they were trying to, that was what I was hearing from them, essentially, that they wanted to replenish themselves. So it was almost like going into this area was doing something for them, energetically, spiritually, even mentally and emotionally.
Sure, and there's places like that, you hear a lot of different stories like that, and so I think people that were interested were just kind of putting these places together. Now, do you have particular crystals that you brought on your journey, or?
Yeah, definitely my
Mhm.
quartz. And in particular, I have not had the pleasure of being able to use a Lemurian, seed crystal, but I've heard taking those, and also being able to kind of gather the real energy left behind by some of the masters are things that people do. But no, in my particular case, just my quartz and a few others, my smoky quartz, my amethyst, kind of just trying to pick up the energies there that were left behind. More than anything, it was almost like reconnecting with my past, though, on my end at least. Certain areas and kind of going back to what you said, how certain sites tend to, how would I say this? They tend to affect the physical surroundings in very unique ways. I get that. There's one area in Mexico in particular that is also known as a sacred site that has plant and animal life that are, once again, super unique. The cacti there are like purple, and tortoises
Where is
instead of
that?
it's a very special place. I'll have to send you some information on it. But yeah, very, very interesting place that was used by the ancient people of Mexico for, spiritual development. So it's one of those areas that, like you said, everything's very unique with regards to what happens there. And I'm sure someone's done the research with regards to, once again, those photons and the radiation there. But I would be curious to know how it's affected, life in general throughout time. If we could get a measure of, it'd be wonderful. Okay.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to learn that too. That's really interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there. Okay. Well, Heather, where would you like to take this next? We could go in a multitude of directions here. Going on, continuing with our information about the platonic solids, or even kind of continuing the conversation about energy.
Right. Well, and this is there's a common thread that's happening throughout all of this, and talking about crystalline and crystalline structures, vortexes, sacred geometry, all this is energy and forms of communication. And it's the way that the universe and our world communicates with us, and that we then can communicate back to it, and also how we communicate with ourselves, right? Our deeper sense of self that we have. So I love the idea of talking about the vortexes. Please, for our listeners, go and look up 10 top vortexes of our planet, and see what research has been done. I know we started talking about last show about the platonic solid, sacred geometry, and the ideal of lattices and crystal lattices. So I know you want to touch a little bit upon that. Of course, the crystal is the structure itself, right? It's the repetition of the identical structural units in our three-dimensional space. So that is what mathematically a lattice is. It points at a specific coordinate in space, and this replicates itself over and over and over again. So hence, we get the base of the lattice structure, and we get the lattice structure that it's itself. A lattice is not necessarily a crystal, though. I want to make sure that everyone understands that, because we always say, crystal lattice, or, those two words oftentimes go together. But a lattice doesn't necessarily make a crystal. A lattice, once again, is really just mathematical points at a specific coordinate in space that's replicated and identical. So this does happen, of course, in crystal structures, in our rock structures. So I just want to kind of point that that out to people.
Yeah.
But but the lattice structure itself is very interesting, and the fact that it has the ability to replica
Hmm.
and itself is what makes itself exist in our three-dimensional world. So, super important. There we get those platonic solids that Plato recognized these grid patterns. And that's where we got them, the cube and the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, and the isohedron, which are the building blocks of pretty much everything in our world. And Plato also associated these shapes with the elements. So earth and fire, air, water, spirit, these energy grids translated to, the basic elements, as he put it. So really, really
Fascinating.
interesting. Would like to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, on my end, the whole purpose of kind of getting into crystals and even beginning this program, it was all about learning more about the nature of reality, and that's really what this is all about. It's about energy and understanding what we are and what is out there or in here. Also, learning about crystals isn't just a matter of structure, even though I also like everything that you just mentioned, because it certainly provides a reference point from which to kind of construct and visualize our reality. But also to how can the information, well, I ask myself, how can the information that I learned today be applied to other disciplines, other sciences? And it kind of goes back to chemistry as well. You mentioned the elements. We're talking about chemistry and, the noble gases. And we're talking about the application. Then how can we use this? Well, the application of this chemistry for the human body. You mentioned earlier cellular regeneration. So my whole thing, which was once again associated with this, was also alchemy. So I have always enjoyed the study of transmutation and once again transformation. And on my end, learning about crystals, I feel, is somehow tied to this research. So that's where this all ties in on my end. In regards to the crystalline lattices, one of the reasons I'm also quite fascinated with it is because of the utilization of lasers. I feel like lasers have a strong association and possibly a strong, what would be the word? I'm like at a loss for words today. I'm not quite sure why, but definitely it happens. It's one of those days. But I think lasers can be applied to age regression as well. Well, I don't really see it as age, more like senescence, but it's all tied on that end. So I'd love to be able to, at some point, post more information regarding some of this research. At this time, it looks like we have 5 minutes on the program or less. So I don't really want to inundate our listeners with so much information, but we're talking about crystals, we're talking about metals, we're talking about elements and the ability to repair the body. Once again, more of which will be written upon on the Crystal Connections official website, and also connections with the noble gases and other elements. So there's just so much to explore.
There's a lot to explore, and I think one of the keys in our shows, and this is our third one, is to remember and have that awakening that we have this amazing ability to be healers of our self, right? And we have this amazing capacity in our brains and our bodies, and to be able to utilize the tools that have been out there and be open to the tools that we might not even understand, and at this moment completely, that have been on our planet and beyond. And to learn from our ancients, to learn from our ancestors, to learn from our previous existences and other and all these things, to be open to the capacity and to start just learning and exploring.
I would completely agree with you on that, Heather. We're never going to stop learning, and the challenges that we face, in the future, or even now, they're becoming more complicated, more essentially challenging. So this is a perfect opportunity to reconnect with the past, as we know it anyways, and learn more about what worked for them and what can be used now. Take the good. It's not everything that has happened or will happen is positive, but we can certainly take what is and what has worked and give it to the future generations and let them create an alternate reality. So that's the whole point, using the world, learning about the world, and becoming immersed in its beauty.
Thank you, Natalie, for those words. Those are perfect words to kind of catapult us into looking forward to the next show together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Heather, thank you so much for providing your support and your wisdom today. It's been deeply, deeply appreciated, as well as your patience.
Well, thank you for when I matrixed out.
No worries. You came back.
Great to share time.
No problem. Okay, everyone. Well, thank you once again so much for joining us today. I am Natalie Sabatini, and Heather Caton was with me, or is with me today. Please.
I'm still here, actually. Yeah.
You never know. You never know with Heather if she's here or not.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. Okay. Well, once again, please feel free to join us for another episode. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Good night. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Crystal Connections Radio Show with Heather Caton and Natalie Sabatini on OWGN, Otherworld Global Network. Remember to visit and like the OWGN Facebook page and subscribe to the free newsletter for more show notifications.